Podcasting from Singapore and broadcasting all around the world. You're listening to the Ignite EdTech Podcast with Craig Kemp, taking the pulse of educators from all over the globe and bringing what you need every week. When you need answers, you go to the experts. Created by an educator, for educators, and streaming to the world. Now, over to your host, Craig Kemp.
Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Ignite EdTech Podcast, the first episode of 2021. I'm your host, Craig Kemp, and I'm thrilled to have your support. I am over the moon to have you here for the first episode of a new year and a new podcast name and format. Aligning the podcast to my Ignite EdTech business, I wanted to ensure that things were streamlined and all in one place. So this podcast, although very heavily focused on chatting about EdTech, will now be known as the Ignite EdTech Podcast. I'm thrilled to take this to the next level in our second year online, and I can't wait to hear from you about what you want and need from this free learning series. Ignite EdTech continues to grow and develop as a business, and I'm honoured to now have an even bigger team supporting schools and EdTech companies globally. The Ignite EdTech podcast will continue to drop a new episode every week and will bring you news, tips, solutions, ways of learning and interviews with the best of the best in the education and EdTech industry. As most of you know, I continue to work with the incredibly talented Mark Quinn to improve the final audio quality of this podcast. He has his own podcast production studio that provides editing and mastering services to content creators. To connect with Mark, please see the details in the podcast notes below. To start a new year and a new season of the Ignite EdTech podcast, I wanted to hear from you on social media to answer this question. Thinking about how terrible 2020 was for most of us and how hopeful we are that 2021 will turn everything around, I want to know your hashtag one word. What one word are you keeping in the back of your mind this year to be positive, grow, develop, and thrive? My one word is create. I'm on a mission to help educators, organizations, and EdTech companies all over the world move from surviving to thriving so that we can create the new normal together with or without COVID. Please share your words with me and your reasoning why. I can't wait to hear from you soon. A tool that has positively impacted the authentic and purposeful use of technology into classrooms and meeting rooms that I have worked in is Thinglink. Thinglink allows you to create unique experiences with interactive images, videos, and 360-degree media for use in your school or classroom. Thinglink started from the idea of connecting objects in our physical environment to digital information about them and making it easy for anyone to do that. It's an award-winning platform that makes it easy to augment images, videos, and virtual tours for additional information and links. Over 4 million teachers and students use Thinglink for creating accessible visual learning experiences in the cloud. Thinglink offers an easy way to create audio-visual learning materials that are accessible in an integrated reading tool. All text descriptions and image or video hotspots can be read with Immersive Reader in over 60 languages. I highly recommend that you take a look at thinglink.com. The link is in the description below. This week, I wanted to spend some time talking about my thoughts on the top 5 trends for EdTech in 2021 and what to look out for as an educator and leader. After the year that was 2020, I'm staying optimistic about moving forward, and EdTech is one of the industries that has the power to disrupt education and move us forward for the better. I genuinely feel that what we do in 2021 and how we adapt and change will influence the next phase of education as we reimagine what is possible. Here are my personal thoughts on EdTech trends to watch out for in 2021. Number 1. Personalized and adaptive learning. Addressing every individual learner's needs is a critical task in education. No teacher can separately look into every student and teach according to their way of understanding with the limited time that we have every day. However, EdTech products are working hard to personalize the learning experience for everyone using built-in technology to ensure the experience is adaptive and the data supports next learning steps. For example, companies like Education Perfect are adapting their solutions so that teachers and students can personalize their learning journey and get next steps immediately when questions are answered. Number 2, blockchain technology. The distributed ledger technology, or DLT, from blockchain brings so many benefits to education, especially around data storage. Every time new data is added, it adds another block to the system, so the storage is technically limitless. Simultaneously, the data is encrypted and distributed across multiple computers in the system. Blockchain technology is used in massive open online courses, or MOOCs, and, of course, within e-portfolios to verify skills and knowledge. Within the education sector, blockchain is being used to issue diplomas. Credentials stored on a blockchain represent a more viable and ecological alternative to paper copies of a diploma. It's also a time-saving solution, enabling graduates to send their potential employers a link that will allow them to quickly review the candidate's qualification. Digital blockchain-based documents will also prevent candidates from submitting fake degrees, something that's become very common out of many developing countries. Number 3, big data and data-driven insights. In the days of distance learning, students are taking tests at home rather than in a classroom with teacher supervision. At times, distance learning at home means little or no supervision in the room during schooling hours. This lack of oversight leaves room for unhealthy levels of accountability, high-stakes testing, and stress. EdTech helps to solve this problem. Apps let teachers administer quizzes and generate immediate results due to automated technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning, which we'll talk about in a moment. They also allow the teacher to monitor the student effectively and evaluate the progress he or she is making. Number 4. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, or AI and ML. People have predicted that through 2021, AI could become the primary trend and grow by more than 45%. First and foremost, AI can automate basic activities in education, like grading. It's now possible for teachers to automate grading of the multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank type questions. Therefore, automated grading of students' writing may not be far behind. Furthermore, both learners and educators could benefit from AI. For example, students could get help from AI tutors when teachers are too busy to support everyone to the best of their abilities. EdTech AI solutions can also be used to identify the main problems and obstacles that students are facing while learning. They could systemize them and help improve their education ecosystem. Customization has become an important educational trend, and this is where machine learning solutions will save time and improve the efficiency of education. Artificial intelligence is the core of EdTech. AI has availed millions of use case studies across multiple sectors and a considerable amount to education as well. For example, face recognition technology is now being used to take attendance by recognizing students' faces automatically. AI enables a list of features in exam monitoring. It identifies cheating during online exams and conducts online invigilation. It identifies cheating during online exams through AI-powered auto-proctoring. Number 5, immersive learning with AR. The class learning experience has undergone a tremendous change since augmented reality, or AR, came to education. The rise in demand for experiential learning pushes for the development of learning AR. Learning has become much more interactive than traditional methods. While VR, or virtual reality, provides a constructed reality, AR gives an enhanced view of a real image. Therefore, it helps explain complex concepts that plain images or even labs' hands-on experiences can't show students. Augmented reality not only enables teachers to capture students' attention, but it also helps teach them in a more engaging and productive way, which simplifies the concept explanation process. This, in turn, makes the teaching learning experience more interactive and immersive. Tools like Hologo World are changing the face of education with their AR solution. The education system is no longer synonymous with the traditional classroom setup, and students are now leveraging EdTech solutions and tools to learn at their desired pace. I can't wait to see what happens in 2021, and the Ignite EdTech podcast will be there to share the latest and greatest news and updates in the EdTech space with you every week. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Please share your thoughts on the future of EdTech and the trends that you think we will expect to see in 2021. Every week, I bring you a short interview with some of my edu heroes, an engaging learning experience with someone who makes a difference in education every day, with a particular focus or angle towards educational technology. This week, I had the pleasure of chatting with Holly Clark and Tom Demico. Let's have a listen to the chats. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Holly Clark. You might know her as @HollyClarkEDU on Twitter with over 41,000 followers. Holly and I have been connected for some time, and it's always an honor to connect with her because I learn so much, and I know today will be no different. Holly is based in the US and is an education thought leader, international speaker, best-selling author, and a huge advocate for students. She's a 20-plus year educator who has spent over 15 years teaching in a one-to-one classroom and over 5 years as an administrator in both public and private schools. Holly, it's an incredible pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk about education and technology integration?
I'm always ready to talk about those things.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very much excited about our chat. Why don't you start by describing your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
So my current role is interesting because I get to do a lot of engagements with the schools in which I help team teach. And that means I go in and I work with the teacher and I kind of show how I might do it in the classroom. We deconstruct it, then they take over and try it and we deconstruct their lesson. So I do a lot of in-person coaching and I really enjoy that. And that seems to be my main role right now outside of writing books and doing all the social media stuff. And I quite enjoy it.
That's really cool. And I think that in your role, you get physical exposure, obviously, in the US with a lot of the work you do, but you also see online and the connected world with what's happening in every corner of the globe. When you think about educational technology, what's your best advice for educators?
So my best advice has always been to keep it simple. And there are lots of tools out there and lots of people coming out with new tools, but find a tool belt that works for you. And maybe it's just 5 that you kind of have on rotation. I, for one, could use Flipgrid all day long. So that's one in my rotation. And maybe once you get really good with those 5, take a look around at maybe adding 2 more to your tool belt, but never think that you need to be using everything. And just because it's shiny and new doesn't mean you need to try it. If Flipgrid is working for you, maybe Flipgrid is all you do and you use it in new and unique ways as you move along in your journey.
Yeah, I think it's great advice because I think new people coming in and probably some of the listeners today often think that, more technology is the best way to go. And I think schools often make big mistakes when they're purchasing and spending budget and they go for the latest, greatest thing. I'm sure you've seen some examples of that in practice as well. How do you help schools in those sorts of situations or educators to make the right decisions?
So I kind of carry around in my coaching tool belt this idea that we really need to use technology to make student thinking visible. And we need to use it to empower what we're already doing well. And so I ask schools to think about what is their goal? What are they wanting from this tool? And for me right now, I'm really kind of impressed with and I'm calling it press record. And what I mean by press record is allowing students this opportunity to explain their learning journey to us and to maybe when they're turning in a paper, say to the teacher using the press record in Flipgrid or Seesaw or Screencastify, whatever app gives you the opportunity to hear students articulate their learning. But let's say they're turning in a paper. They could go to Screencastify, have that paper up on the screen and say, hey, Ms. Clark, this is my paper I'm turning in. Here is what I was trying to get across to you. This particular paragraph 2, I'm super proud of my word choice. I really spent a lot of time developing this second sentence, but I could use some feedback in the conclusion. And so it's allowing students to really narrate their work using this press record and tell us more about the learning journey. Before technology kind of era, if I wanted to give that kind of information to my teacher, I had to sit across the desk from her. She would have had to do that with 30 kids. And now as simple as 1, 2, 3, I can go onto Flipgrid or Screencastify or these tools I just mentioned, and I can really ask my students to tell me something about their learning. And what becomes very important about that is that school, no matter what country you're in, school is there to get kids ready for the job market. And one day they're going to have to sit across the desk from someone at a job interview. And maybe if they're an entrepreneur, they're going to have to convince a venture capitalist. And they're going to have to be able to articulate their ideas, explain the journey, talk about their needs and their strengths and weaknesses in the same way that they could have done that with the paper. And so as we prepare kids for the job market, we really need to allow them to articulate their thinking and their learning. And in schools where we're doing this in the United States, I've actually seen test scores go up because we know something about kids and reading and writing. You can't be great reader and writer until you have a mastery of your oral skills. And so allowing kids that opportunity to talk, to make their thinking visible using press record has really risen to the top for me of things I'm trying to get teachers to try as we make the shift into more digital learning. And it's a digital pedagogy actually that I try to instill in teachers because we didn't have that opportunity.
Holly, point us to an EdTech tool that you currently love using in your day-to-day work.
So that's easy. If someone came to me and said, you can have one tool and that's it, and you can use no other tools, what tool would you use? And every time, hands down, it would be Flipgrid. And Flipgrid, August 1st, US August 1st, your August 2nd, is coming out with a bunch of new updates, and it's going to be amazing to watch kids do exactly what I just said, press record and articulate their thinking. And I'm so excited for their updates.
That's awesome. We're definitely going to watch out for that one. That sounds really exciting. You know, as educators, Holly, we love to learn, and it's super important to all of us. What's one book or resource that you've been reading lately, or just one of your all-time favorites? And tell us why we should be exploring it.
So I have two that I come back to a lot. And the first one is called Make It Stick. And I find every time I'm giving advice to educators, I come back to this idea that we've got to find a way to make the learning stick. So I'm always referencing it to people who are doing things. I'm like, you really need to grab this book. And what I like about the book is it's about cognitive learning science and really how we apply the things we're learning in that field to our everyday practice as educators. And then now, because our world is a bit different than it was a few months ago, I am always talking to parents and teachers about a book from the US here called Educated, and it's by Tara Westover. And I want to just take a second to tell you that this book is about a girl's journey. She was homeschooled, and because she was on like kind of a ranch or whatever, her family didn't really homeschool her. They had her working instead, and she didn't have all the math and the writing she needed to be able to do. So at 16, she decided that she wanted to go to college. And she hadn't learned all of these things. And she went to YouTube and she learned how to write. She went to YouTube and learned how to do math. And from those YouTube videos, she took the SATs, so our kind of standard tests that we take to get into college. She did really well on those. She got into the college that she wanted to. And then soon she was off to Cambridge University in London, one of the top schools in the world. And that's where she got, it was either Cambridge or Oxford. I'm pretty sure it's Cambridge. And she got her PhD there. And so as we are worried about kids losing a year, or maybe they got behind in some subject in school, I always refer people to this book because this girl pretty much didn't have school for the first 16 years of her life, and she still made it. And so we need to, when we're trying new lessons in our classroom, we need to not be so stressed that a kid is going to miss something. And Tara Westover explains in this, or kind of in her story, I took away from it that we can't, kids are resilient. They're going to be okay. And it gives us the green light to be able to try new things in our classroom and not worry about anything world-wise that comes around. They're not going to lose learning during these times when we're trying new things. And if Tara Westover can do this, we have a lot to learn about the resiliency of kids.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check those out, and we'll make sure that all these links are in the podcast description below as well. And Holly, on top of everything you do, and you've touched on it a little bit, you're a published author and you do a lot of writing, and I'm totally inspired by what you write and the sorts of things you produce and publish. But tell us about your books and the journey that you went on and what inspired you to write them.
I wrote my books for teachers because they were always coming up to me and asking for ideas, and I didn't always have time. So the Google Infused Classroom, which is really about how do we take the things that we have to do in our classroom and use technology to empower those. And then my recent book, which just came out, which is called the Chromebook Infused Classroom, is really about how do we, instead of asking what we can do with the technology, how can we step back and ask what can the students do with the technology? And how do we create these student-centered classrooms where we give students agency over their learning? So the combo of the Google Infused Classroom and also the Microsoft Infused Classroom, those two books are about what the teacher can do. And then I added on top the one with the Chromebook Infused Classroom about what students can do, because I was reading a lot of books and no one was talking about that. Nobody was talking about what the student could do with technology. So I wanted to fill that void.
You know, Holly, everything you've talked about is something that I've followed with you on this journey as well over the past few years. And I think everything you're writing about, everything you're talking about, there's something there for everyone. What are the best ways for our listeners to connect and follow with you?
So pretty easy. I can be followed at Holly Clark EDU, both on Twitter and Instagram. And recently I've got on TikTok. I don't know how much the Kiwis listen or watch TikTok. We're a little obsessed with it over here. But on TikTok, I'm doing these 1-minute PDs. So I'm not dancing. You're not going to find me dancing and doing the normal TikTok stuff. I'm just doing quick 1-minute PDs, like how do you use an AR code in Flipgrid. And so I'm really having fun with that because it's fun to create these quick PD snippets. And then, of course, my Facebook group is kind of on fire, and it is at, if you just do a search for groups and do Infused Classroom, you can find that pretty easily.
Thank you so much, Holly. We'll make sure those links are in the description below. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. And shout out to all Kiwi educators. You guys are doing such a great job down there.
Today, I have the honor of speaking with Tom Demico. You might know him from Twitter as @TDOttawa, where he is a constant sharer of high-quality educational content and ideas. Tom is a Catholic educator who is passionate about deep learning, leadership, EdTech, innovation, and creativity, amongst many other aspects of learning. Tom, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk about education and technology integration?
I sure am, Craig, and it's great to join you across the world. Wonderful.
Absolutely, and that's what gets me going as well, being able to connect with so many people in so many places all over the world. Why don't you start by describing your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Certainly. I'm currently the Associate Director of Education with the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Next year will be my first role as Director of Education. Our school year here in Ottawa, Canada, runs from September to June, and we're really privileged to support 45,000 students in 83 schools. In terms of your question, what inspires me, I would say it's knowing that as educators, we can plant the seeds to change a student's life. This is my 30th year in education, so I've always enjoyed working with students that some may say are the most challenging, but they're the ones that really need our help the most. And I know that as adults, as long as we don't give up trying to support them, we may not see the results today, but we're planting seeds that may change their future. So that's what really motivates me every day as an educator.
And 30 years in education, Tom, amazing. What excites you about education today?
Well, today what really excites me is the opportunity to transform education. And not just through technology, but through frameworks and things like deep learning, where we get a chance to focus on not just content and knowledge, but we're looking at global competencies. Whether you look at 4 C's, 5 C's, 6 C's, it's the key areas like creativity, communication, character, critical thinking, citizenship, collaboration. I look at those global competencies and I see an opportunity for educators to help students learn those areas. And to me, we're flipping around education. Instead of teaching content matter, we're trying to teach students those competencies through the use of content matter. So that's also really exciting.
And so many great nuggets of advice there. What about specifically about educational technology? What's your best advice for educators in relation to EdTech?
I'd say my advice is there's no problem in terms of any entry point for any educator wherever you are. So my advice is just get started. Don't try to use every tool and get overwhelmed with the latest shiny object, but focus on what that technology can do for you as an educator that you couldn't do without it. So I look at some simple examples of allowing students to work collaboratively on a document from different locations around the world. It could be interviewing an astronaut in real time, connecting with others from other countries. You can't do that without that technology. So that's really what I'm looking at in terms of my advice. And for those technology people out there, certainly looking at the SAMR model, it's looking at areas where you really can find new ways of doing things that weren't possible without technology.
You and I connected, Tom, on social media, on Twitter. What's your choice of professional learning network? Where do you engage and who should we be connecting with?
Well, Craig, Twitter certainly is the area that I use a lot for my own professional learning network, but it's just one of many networks. Many years ago, I started using Diego, D-I-E-G-O, to look at different lists that other people around the world were creating on topics of interest. And I still subscribe to those and check them weekly. I subscribe to over 2,000 email lists, so it may sound like a lot, but I have some tools that I use that allowed me to check those either daily or weekly, and I'll mention some of those in a moment. There's several blogs that I follow, email newsletters. I find real pragmatic information from regular people on Twitter, some people like Matt Miller, Jake Miller, Richard Byrne, different educator technologies newsletter. I'm a member of TCEA, that's the Texas Computer Educators Association, although I'm in Ottawa, Canada. They have some great resources. I follow people like Alice Keeler, Casey Bell from Shake Up Learning. Those are all people that I get real pragmatic tools that I can share with educators throughout our district. But I also see my role in looking at change agents and leadership. And for those, I follow people like Michael Fullen, Andy Hargreaves, Alan November. And you mentioned the deep learning. I'm the Canadian lead for deep learning, or co-lead for Canadian deep learning. And we're part of the NPDL, New Pedagogies for Deep Learning. That's a network of 1,500 schools across 8 countries, led by Joanne Quinn and Michael Fullen. So there's so many networks out there. And again, similar to the earlier advice, find ones that work for you and don't get overwhelmed because there's just so many, but find the ones that work for you. And every once in a while, revisit to add some new ones and take some away that are no longer serving your needs.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how many professional learning networks there are out there that people connect and engage in, and just how rewarding it can be? What about, Tom, an EdTech tool that you're currently loving the use of in your day-to-day work?
I would say there's 2 tools that I use as an administrator that allow me to filter and curate resources so I can share with others. The 2 tools I would say that I'd recommend. One is called unroll.me, UNROLL.me. And what unroll.me does is it goes through those 2,000 subscriptions I mentioned. And on average, each day, I get about 250 emails that never make it into my Gmail account. So it scans all of those emails and it packages them into one nice bundle. And at the beginning of each day, I can quickly go through that one email that has a nice curated list of all the email topics, newsletters that I follow. And I can then click on the ones that interest me, and the ones that I don't really need right now or of no interest, I don't have to spend a lot of time on them. In one glance, I can go through 250 emails of newsletters and subscription-based. That tool allows me to say which emails from colleagues, for example, don't get bundled and they stay in my inbox. When I then go through those unroll.me topics, I find the ones that are of interest to me, and I use another tool called Scoop.it. So it's SCOOP.it. And I use that tool to curate resources. So I look at an interesting newsletter, for example, and I see there's a new tool recommended for screencasting or a tutorial from someone around the world that I thought would be of interest to educators in our district, and I will quickly capture that. It goes into my Scoop.it account with keywords, and I can also schedule it to post on Twitter. I can grab an image and put it in there. So it's really automating multiple functions very quickly. And that's really important to me because time is one of our most precious commodities. And I can use those resources and then share them when I need them. And it could be a month later that someone will say to me, do you have any recommendations for digital citizenship resources? And I can quickly direct them to my Scoop.it account, or I can just do a filter myself and send them real current information on digital citizenship that I've curated from around the world. And I see that as a real important function for administrators, filtering information for their staff, because the closer you get to the students, those are the people that have the most impact, and they don't have the time that some others might have for looking through all those different resources.
The process you've described, Tom, is fantastic and a really great way, I think, for our listeners to use an EdTech tool for their own learning. Often we think about EdTech tools for our students' learning, but I think one of the things we have to focus more on is ourselves and professional learning for ourselves. So those tools are fantastic, and I've put the links to those in the podcast description below. Learning is important to all of us, Tom. Tell us about one book or resource that you've been reading lately, or just one of your all-time favorites, and tell us why we should be exploring it.
Well, you're trying to limit me to one book, so I'm going to give you a couple. I love reading, and that's one way of staying current, is expanding your knowledge is through reading. So the last book that I've just finished is by Fullen and Mary Jean Gallagher. It's called The Devil is in the Details: System Solutions for Equity, Excellence, and Student Well-Being. So that's one of Fullen's most recent books, and it's of interest to me because I'm really interested in system perspectives. If you have a system like we do with 83 schools and hundreds of classrooms, it's great to see a dynamic teacher that can really motivate and engage their students, but we need to see that happen across the entire district. So this book really is about system change and moving your entire district. The other area I'm doing a lot of reading on currently is anything related to equity. All kinds of challenges, I think, around the world when we look at the area of equity, whether that's equity dealing with poverty, marginalized youth, gender-based, all kinds of areas that we need to address. So I'm currently reading Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, and other conversations about race. If you ask me for some recommended books, I certainly would recommend Deep Learning, Engage the World to Change the World. Again, another book by Michael Fullen, and that one's also by Joanne Quinn and Joanne McKecken. For those of you that follow your podcast that are very much interested in EdTech, I'm going to go back probably a year's time, so 2018, 19, two books that I thought were a little bit different, but really helped push my thinking. One was called Rewiring Education: How Technology Can Unlock Every Student's Potential. And that's by John Couch, who was Apple's first VP of Education. And the other one that's probably familiar to you is Future Driven: Will Your Students Thrive in an Unpredictable World? David Gerwin. And certainly that's relevant today. So that's enough to keep you going. Lots of other books. I also use Twitter to see what books some of my colleagues from around the world are recommending. And sometimes it's great to get out of your comfort zone and look at areas besides EdTech, but where EdTech can have an influence.
Yeah, all of those resources you've shared are fantastic. And again, the links are in the description below. Tom, you've shared so much amazing stuff today. What's the best way for the listeners to follow and connect with you?
Twitter is certainly my go-to social networking, professional networking tool. So as you mentioned at the beginning, it's at TD Ottawa. So that's Tom Demico Ottawa, at TD Ottawa. And I'd be happy to connect with any of your listeners and continue to follow you and the great work that you're doing in sharing resources, Craig.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for giving me your time today.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Next week, join me for episode 35 of the EdTech Chat podcast, when I'm joined by Ditch That Textbook leader, Matt Miller. One of the things I love doing is giving away prizes as a thank you for tuning in, listening, and hopefully subscribing to the Ignite EdTech podcast. This week, I'm giving away books from Holly Clark, To win these prizes, you need to go to bit.ly/edtechwin and complete the simple form. It'll take you less than a minute to do. The link is in the description below, and the competition closes on Wednesday the 3rd of February. The winner will be contacted directly by me and announced on next Friday's podcast episode. Good luck! Thank you for being an extremely important part of the Ignite EdTech podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please smash that subscribe button and share it with your colleagues, friends, and families. Please remember to spend 2 minutes to rate the podcast too, so we can reach even more educators and EdTech enthusiasts globally. Please share your favorite part of today's episode by tagging me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And please don't hesitate to ask me questions that I can answer in an upcoming episode. Remember, you have the chance to win as well. Check out the links in the description for more, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening. If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And be in the drawing to win prizes every week. If you know others that would enjoy the show, please hit that share button and brighten their day. Join us again next week for your weekly EdTech hit with @Mr. Kemp NZ. We'll see you again soon.